John Harbaugh sent a clear message to Jaire Alexander, and that message was the correct one. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And thank you to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. 5 days a week plus more here of daily Ravens coverage. And we have a jam-packed show for you on a new look edition of Locked On Ravens. The Ravens win in week 2 against the Cleveland Browns. And the Ravens sent a message to Jaire Alexander, I think, with his scratch designation. And John Harbaugh talked about that message after the game. So we'll dive into what he had to say and why I think personally it was the right decision and the right message to send, not just for Jaire, but for the whole team. Then in the second part of the show, we'll dive into Lamar Jackson as he ends up giving a little mic drop to the Ravens defense. And I want to talk about the Ravens defense as a whole in that segment alongside with Lamar. Then finally, we'll get into some Ravens and Browns analysis. So lots to dive into here. And of course, this is a new look version of the show. We've been teasing different types of changes. I've been using a green screen now if you're watching in video form for the better part of a month and a half now. And this is the very soft launch of the new background here. Sometimes you got to just stay the same. And I got the bookshelf still in the back. We got some things in the background, but it will be evolving over the next couple of days, couple of weeks. So this is just the bare bones version 1.0, but the green screen was getting a little crazy. So this is what we're going to rock with. I actually have a camera here now, so it's going to be different looking into a camera as opposed to just the webcam I've been using, but upgrades all the way. That's what I promised here over the offseason, and we're continuing to roll out thing after thing. So we're going to see how this goes. I'm excited for it, and of course, I'm excited the Ravens picked up a win in week number 2 against the Browns, 41-17 drubbing of the Cleveland Browns. And you know, there was a lot to take away from the game in general. We talked about that over the course of the watch along that we did yesterday. We had the instant reaction show, Locked On Ravens Squad show, and we'll certainly get into more analysis of the game as everything goes on here. But I want to first start off with a decision that was made before the game. That is Jaire Alexander ended up being scratched. Now, we did not have an injury designation going into the game. He's obviously been nursing a knee injury and trying to work back from that. And the Ravens made the decision to make him inactive in this game. Now, it's a bit of a surprise since he didn't have the designation, but after the game, John Harbaugh spoke on what that decision was and why it ended up happening. It was actually a question more so about Marlon Humphrey and getting opportunities for guys like TJ Tampa, who had some nice plays, Teddy Buchanan, and talked about all the decisions that they made throughout the game and said that those guys played well and good to see guys step up when the opportunity presents itself. And John Harbaugh actually took it upon himself to just answer the question about Jaire himself. He said, I know you're going to ask me about Jaire. Jaire Alexander is going to play great football for us this year. I kind of made the decision to make him inactive. He was pushing me hard, but I made the decision and told him, let's get completely right and in football shape. You have to be in football shape, and he didn't get a chance to be in training camp for the full thing, so he's healthy and he's going to be fine. He'll be out there very soon playing great ball for us. I want to say this. This is the correct decision. This is the right thing to do, and I think this is what will benefit the Ravens in the long run. If there was a position, and we saw yesterday, right? If there was a position for the Ravens that they could afford to not have one of their stars, not Jaire Alexander is a star, it's in the secondary, right? Because you guys still have guys like Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, TJ Tampa, Chidobe Awuzie, and yes, Marlon went down. Apparently, Nate Wiggins was looking a little banged up in the locker room after, according to a couple of reports, so I guess that's stuff to monitor. But I've said this about a lot of different players. I've said it about Jaire himself. Jaire or anybody, any player being out there not 100% or at least not as close to it as they can be, it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the player because they're not able to do what they need to do. They can't make plays they usually make. That ends up souring their reputation at times. It, just being out there aggravates them for potentially the risk of re-injury, which is always difficult. You don't want to go out there on a bum, in Jaire Alexander's case, knee in like 75%, and then you just make it worse. You don't want to do that. And then for the team, you're putting a guy out there that, can't play to his full capabilities, and that hurts you as a team. The Ravens have taken a generally cautious approach ever since J.K. Dobbins went down in 2021 and Gus Edwards, Marcus Peters, that nightmare practice. And I think we've seen that with Isaiah Likely. I think we've seen that with Patrick Ricard. Like we've seen that with guys. And I think for Jaire, look, clearly he was not ready to play in that week 1 game, right? He just wasn't. He had multiple gaffes, multiple plays that usually he makes, he couldn't make and just didn't make. He needed more time. Training camp is a really big opportunity to, obviously, especially if you're a new player on a team, make plays in training camp, get acclimated with your coaches, acclimated with your teammates. But it's just to stay in football shape too. And Jaire clearly was not in football shape. I mean, you saw the way, for example, Roquan Smith was flying around on defense yesterday, or Kyle Hamilton was flying around on defense yesterday. That's the type of shape you need to be in. And for Jaire, he wasn't there. And it served them better to put out players like Chidobe Awuzie and TJ Tampa as opposed to Jaire. Now, is Jaire a better player than Chidobe Awuzie and TJ Tampa? I believe so. I think he's a star in this league. But he needs to be able to show that on a weekly basis. And how does he show that? He needs to be able to play the way Jaire Alexander knows he can play. And how do you do that? It's about being healthy. So I think this was the absolute right message to send. And Jaire is a competitor, right? He wants to be out there. He wants to play. He would have probably wanted nothing more than to go out there in this game in week 2 against Cleveland and have a bounce back game. That bounce back game is coming, I think, in my opinion here. It could be week 3, who knows? But he does need some more time to ramp up. And that's why, for example, we saw for Isaiah Likely. Isaiah didn't play in this game in week 2 yesterday. He returned to practice, but he still needs time to completely ramp up into football shape again after not practicing for a little while, and also just to get that injury fully right. And we heard in the offseason John Harbaugh talking about how Jaire was kind of itching to get back on the field, and they were trying their best to hold him in. And Jaire felt like he was, I guess, what Harbaugh said. He was like in prison. He thought he was in prison or something because he wasn't able to get back on the field. Well, Jaire at this point is going to be a great help to I agree with John Harbaugh. He's going to be a great help to the team this season, but you have to be able to stay healthy to do that. And I think for the Ravens yesterday, we saw the fly around ability of a lot of players on that unit. Now, again, hopefully Marlon Humphrey is all right. We'll probably get word on that from John Harbaugh today at some point. We'll dive into those injury updates. Humphrey left the game with a groin injury, so we shall see. But I was really encouraged by what I saw defensively yesterday, particularly in the secondary, because there were a lot of plays, and it wasn't necessarily flashy. You did have the flash, right? Nate Wiggins with the interception. We'll get to this a little bit more in the second part of the show when we talk about the defense a little bit more. But we saw some flash. But a lot of those plays, Joe Flacco was just checking down the ball. It was check down Joe, something we've seen if you've been following this Ravens team for a while. And look, I certainly remember check down Joe is a guy that sometimes just couldn't find anything open, and it'd just be, all right, check down 2 yards to whoever it was, Ray Rice, Justin Forsett, any of those backs. And that's what we saw on Sunday from Joe. Why? Because the secondary was sticky in coverage. Jerry Jeudy had those comments about the Ravens secondary, no challenges. Jerry Jeudy finished 4 receptions for 51 yards in this game. A very pedestrian effort, had a big drop that I think cost the Browns 3 points. The Ravens secondary did cause challenges, and that was a big reason why the pass rush was able to get to Joe Flacco. 2 sacks in this game for the Ravens, but the box score, the win rates, all those stats when they come out, I'm sure it will tell a different story than just 2 sacks. We saw a lot of quick wins. Odafe Owe, Nnamdi Madubuike, Mike Green had a few, which was really encouraging. Tavius Robinson with the strip sack. I'll give Joe some credit, though. He ended up escaping the pocket a little better than I thought he would. I thought he'd be a little more immobile at his age, but there were a lot of plays where the Ravens did get quick pressure, and Joe would just kind of get flushed out and run and throw the ball at a guy's feet, throw the ball away, throw it to a check down player. There were a lot of those plays, but you could tell the pass rush in the secondary, in my opinion, were extremely married in this game. That's what I always say, right, about the Ravens and their defense, just defense in general at the NFL level, right? Like the pass rush and secondary, they play off of each other. Those coverage plays where quarterbacks can't find anybody, they're sitting back there for 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds, gives the pass rush time to get home. And as a pass rusher, if you get to the quarterback quickly, boom, 1, 2 seconds, you're there, forces the quarterback into a bad throw, like we saw with Nate Wiggins, that could result in a turnover. And the Ravens forced two really big ones in this game. So I know I cheated a little bit, kind of talking about the defense a little bit at the end of this first part of the show, but we're going to have a lot more here on that defense in the second part of the show. Lamar Jackson dropped the mic on the defense, and it was pretty funny too. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll talk about that as well as the defensive performance as a whole. And a lot more coming up on Locked On Ravens. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. And with football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections. You can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. Now, I've been playing Prize Picks lately, and it's such a fun way to stay locked in for the season. It's quick, it's easy, and honestly, it's my favorite way to follow along with football. I love checking projections too. Like, for example, Lamar Jackson, he's going to go for more or less than his passing yard total. Or maybe Derrick Henry, more or less than 1 rushing touchdown. And this week's max discounts include Patrick Mahomes, 0.5 passing yards Mahomes. The Ravens will be going to Arrowhead next week in week 4, so that'll be exciting. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this new look edition of the show. We got the camera, the background going a little bit here. Got some stuff. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're, again, a 5-day-a-week plus more daily Ravens podcast. So Monday through Friday, we have regularly scheduled programming here, 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also have bonus episodes on the weekend when the headlines permit. We have Locked On Ravens watch-alongs. We had a great watch-along yesterday, watching a win for the Ravens where we react to every single play live. We have an instant reaction show right after that. Locked On Ravens squad show after that with former Ravens receiver Qadry Ismail and Sam Njoku, and that is twice a week, Wednesdays and Sundays after games. So much content here, and look at this. We'll do a little background tour. I need to get all right, here we go. We got the little Raven guy in the bottom there. You got the Maryland crab. Got to have the Maryland there. This guy right here, he's a Crane. He's an OG guy. He was with me for my first background, and glad to have him back there. We got a little penguin in the corner there. So again, first iteration of the background, but part of the many upgrades, sound, audio, video that we have done here on Locked On Ravens. So thank you if you are a video watcher or an audio listener. Same show, both audio and video. Let's get back into the content, though. Lamar Jackson, he might drop the Ravens defense with a really funny quote, really interesting quote, but one that he truly meant. And I think it had all the makings, to me, of a guy that was really proud of his defense as a whole. Now, we know Marlon Humphrey's comments, right? We know what he said about the Ravens defense. And the fact that they, John Harbaugh essentially told them that they weren't mature enough, essentially. I'm paraphrasing there. And then Marlon Humphrey talked about it himself and kind of echoed those sentiments. And Lamar said, well, the defense looked extremely mature today. He said they got turnovers, kept points off the board, except that wild touchdown. But they just did the whole thing, and they did what they're supposed to do today. I saw some people take this as Lamar Jackson taking a shot at John Harbaugh. I don't believe that at all, in my opinion. I just think that Lamar was answering the question honestly, but, at the same time, he's saying, look, this is the defense that we're supposed to have. This is the defense that they were supposed to do. And that, to me, is the mic drop moment. It's like, this is what we know this defense can be. Lamar believes in those guys. And I think, in my opinion, Lamar was proud of that unit. He was ecstatic to give that answer because, when, especially early in the year, there are always going to be different things you have to work on, right? And whether it's the word immature you want to use, Kyle Hamilton used lackadaisical, if it's just sloppy, like whatever you want. Every team has to work on stuff. The thing, though, is with these Super Bowl contending teams, you can't really afford that because we saw in that week 1 game, well, if you lose a game like that, which the Ravens did, could come back to bite you in December or January, and you don't want to get into that habit. But saying that the defense did what they were supposed to do, to me, was a really strong statement from Lamar Jackson. And look, they did do what they were supposed to do. Why? We talked about it all week leading up to the game here on Locked On Ravens, where the Browns offense, their ceiling is much lower and their floor is much lower than the Ravens offense. So in order for the Browns to win this game, Browns offense would have had to have a wildly good game by their standards, and the Ravens offense would have had to have a wildly poor game by their standards. And look, The best thing about this, in my opinion, just taking a brief detour to the offense, is the Ravens offense did not play a great game by their standards, and this team still put up 41 points. There's not a lot you can complain about there. Of course, there are things they have to work on, things they have to improve on, things they have to get better at, whether that's play calling, execution, regardless. But there's always stuff you have to work on after every game, and I'd much rather personally work on that after a win than after a loss, right? I think it's better that way, and I think that now you're in a situation where if you had fallen to 0-2 and 0-1 in the division, and you lose to a team like the Browns, who clearly you're better than on paper, it would have been a rough week leading up to that Monday night game. But I thought that the offense responded after a pretty slow start, and the run game never really got going. And, the passing game had moments where they couldn't hit throws. Lamar was throwing behind guys at points. But you know what the crazy part is about this whole thing? Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, had the quietest 4-touchdown game that I think he's ever played in this one. He went 19-29 for 225 yards and 4 touchdowns. We were doing the watch along. We were following along with the stats and everything. Then I checked the box score during the instant reaction just to get the final tallies. And I'm like, wait, Lamar threw 4 touchdowns. And I'm like, wait, yeah, he did. But it didn't feel that way. And Lamar still dominated. This, to me, was a game that was won by the defense and the special teams. And the offense did their part as the defense and special teams was doing their job. And that's okay, because you know why? Sometimes the defense will pick up the slack for the offense. Sometimes the offense will pick up the slack for the defense, right? It's a team. And even with Derrick Henry averaging 2.1 yards per carry, that Ravens defense was so suffocating against this Cleveland team, where Joe Flacco threw the ball 45 times, only had 199 yards, averaged 4.4 yards per attempt. That's incredible. The Ravens secondary was covering like blankets. They were dominating. They were not letting anybody get open. That pass rush was getting home to Joe pretty quickly for the majority of it. And even though it says here on the box score that the Browns averaged 5.2 yards per carry, a lot of that yardage came from a 31-yard run from Quinshon Judkins late in the game against backups after everybody was already out of the game, the Ravens stars, Roquan, Kyle Hamilton. And in my opinion, you also had a couple of other plays that went against the backups, where look at the running backs for the Browns. Dylan Sampson, 4 carries for 6 yards. Jerome Ford, 6 carries for 31 yards. And again, Judkins had 31 of his yards on 1 carry. He finished with 10 for 61. You want to take that out, it's what, 9 for 30? I mean, that's a pretty good day. And I want to give a shout out again to Roquan Smith. I really do. Roquan played like a man possessed in this game. Roquan played like the player the Ravens traded for. And Q and I, Kadri Ismail, former Ravens receiver, he comes on a ton on this show, and he's a part of Locked On Ravens Squad show too. Q and I talked about Roquan just last week. The clip got a lot of traction, on multiple different platforms. And we were wondering, like, man, Roquan, we both have agreed that Roquan is a good player, but the consistency sometimes is sometimes he doesn't show up in moments. And when the stakes are that high, when you're a $100 million player, when, you have the standard that you do, when you get traded for a second-round pick and a team gives that up for you, those expectations will be there. And so sometimes, like that Buffalo game, Roquan didn't play particularly great by the standard that he is set to. But he was incredible in this game. 15 tackles for Roquan, the scoop and score. And you could tell he was, after the game, he was joking about how it took him back, that scoop and score, to the high school running back days for him. Like, you could tell he was having fun. He was feeling himself, and, he said the defense responded, and it doesn't necessarily matter about, the people in the locker room have the utmost respect for one another. And that includes Zach Gore at the top of the helmet goes down. And, the pressure on everything, you want to put pressure on the opposing offense. Roquan Smith said, yeah, that was the sour taste we all had in our mouths. And it was about moving on and not letting last week beat you twice, right? Roquan is such an insightful person, and I think his perspective is really unique and intriguing. And so I want to play this clip that Q and I had last week about what our thoughts were on Roquan, because I think it gives perspective. And just look, we know Roquan's a good player, but it points at times sometimes to look overwhelmed in spots, and that's not the Roquan that we know. So I'll play this clip, and then we have to keep talking about him, because he was the player of the game, no doubt, to me, in this game. The Ravens, it's in the big spots, in the big moments, they get ahead. And then sometimes they're a different team. They go away from their identity, and that's been a huge issue.
Is there something to be said to talk to, Zach Orr, Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith? What's up with Roquan anyway? Like, bro,
been rough.
Like, there are a couple plays there. I'm like, good God, the guard must be like, yes, I get to block Agent Zero.
Well, I'm even saying on the James Cook play where James Cook took it, I don't know if he was trying to like punch the ball out or like I don't know what he was trying to do.
And that's just not, he is like he was one of the more sure tackling linebackers where there are times when he's gotten blown off the ball or he's taken on a block and like taking a wrong angle. And, that guy that was, we saw come out here and play versus New Orleans. Like, where's that guy at?
Well, I think we found him. I think we found him. Roquan was in full force on Sunday. And like, to me, Roquan is a guy that, I loved him back at his UGA days. I thought he'd be a great fit with the Ravens. Super smart football player, hard-nosed player, instinctive player. And the Ravens got all those qualities. I'm not sitting here saying Roquan was like, oh, he lost all of his powers, right? I don't think that's what you and I were saying in the first place. But to me, I think that every player has bad games and bad moments, and Roquan certainly wanted to right his wrongs from that Buffalo game. On that clip, I mentioned the James Cook play where he kind of just, was trying to punch the ball out, and it just didn't happen for him. And those are the types of plays that can make or break games. And Roquan made a play that made the game after that Tavius Robinson forced fumble. Shout out to Tavius too, by the way. So, I mean, look, I can't say enough good things about Roquan in this game. He was everywhere. He was flying around. And honestly, it's crazy to say this, but his impact went far beyond the box score, and his box score was unbelievable. So that's the type of leader that you need on a defense. Roquan has given that to them, certainly as a vocal leader and a motivational leader. And honestly, he leads by example on the field. And this is the type of player the Ravens need week in and week out. Do I expect him to have 15 tackles and be like utterly unstoppable every single game? No, that's not fair to put on anybody. But, more often than not, Roquan, look, we know he's one of the best players on this team. And I think he understands that. He understands the weight that comes with that. And he holds himself to a very high standard. He holds this defense, this team to a very high standard. And that in itself is leading by example. So shout out a billion times to Roquan Smith. He did his job on Sunday, and he made it so that the Ravens had a really good shot to win this game. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll dive into more analysis from the Ravens' Week 2 win over the Browns. All that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all turn to some funny places for advice, your barista, your barber, maybe even a random stranger in the bathroom. But not everyone is the right one when it comes to real support. That's why BetterHelp is here with over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 10 years of experience. BetterHelp helps you find your right match, someone clinically trained and credentialed to guide you through life's challenges. I like you start with a simple questionnaire, and BetterHelp does the matching work for you. If it's not the right fit, you can switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. It's also flexible. You can join sessions online from home or on the go, which makes therapy fit into your busy schedule. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And the show is brought to you by Upside. Hey, Locked On Ravens fans, you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind and get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or any gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let the software drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher here with you, wrapping up the show for our final segment of the day. Be sure again to hit the like and subscribe button in video form, in audio form. In video form, you can see my background continue to evolve from, again, this is version 1.0 of the new background. I guess the new background was the green screen. But we're done with that. We're doing the actual background now. Finally, look, Ravens win. That was a reason to celebrate. And we celebrate with the new background here. Again, the audio form, we have the new microphone, and we're upgrading everything, video form, audio form. So really appreciate everybody who is here with me today, whether you're a new listener or an everydayer or somewhere in the middle. Again, be sure to tell a friend, tell a family member we're here for them, just like we're here for you on Locked On Ravens, if they maybe want some daily Ravens content as well as maybe a Ravens perspective. And also be sure to follow me on social media at KaosStriker34, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole 9 yards there. Let's continue talking about the Ravens and Browns game again. Lamar Jackson with the quietest 4-touchdown game I think we've ever seen from him. But speaking of Lamar, wanted to dive into a couple of stats here just to appreciate Lamar's greatness. Now, with this game in week 2 against the Browns, Lamar Jackson is currently, he moved ahead of Aaron Rodgers. He is currently the all-time leader in NFL history in passer rating at 102.648. He also has the most rushing yards in history for a quarterback. He also has the most games with 4+ passing touchdowns since 2021, adding that to his resume. And just for reference on the passer rating thing, Lamar is at 102.65 essentially if you round up. Aaron Rodgers 102.60. So look, can still fluctuate, but that it just goes to show Lamar's greatness. And again, Lamar is not going to be a guy that throws for 500 yards every single game and 5 touchdowns every single game, but he's extremely efficient in what he does. And look, this game, he wasn't like his best. Again, he was throwing behind some guys. He missed some balls. He threw out of bounds. He still, out of all of that, had 128.6 passer rating in this game. That's still really good. It's still really good. So even when Lamar is not playing his best, he still finds ways to impact the game. And I want to say this too. We can't take Lamar Jackson for granted. Now, I really try to not do that, but you know, when we see, like, for example, DeAndre Hopkins balled out in this game, right? Had a great passing catch from Lamar to DeAndre that was right at the goal line. I thought should have been a touchdown, but, you know, I guess they still got points out of it, although they should have handed the ball to Derrick Henry on the one. I feel very strongly about that. But on the second throw to DeAndre, and honestly the first one too, Lamar Jackson made 2 incredible throws. One of them, he got outside the pocket. And, you know, for me, who watches Lamar on a weekly basis and has watched Lamar every game for his career, you're thinking, oh, that's just Lamar. You know, it's nothing special. It is special. Like I try to tell myself, it is special. We are witnessing greatness on a weekly basis from Lamar Jackson. And that is something, I mean, in my opinion, there'll never be another quarterback like Lamar Jackson. He is extremely unique in what he does. He's extremely good at what he does. And that to me is more than reason to try to appreciate that, because, you know, I want to appreciate that before it's too late to appreciate it, right? Lamar still has a lot of football left in him, but, you know, we'll be sitting here 10, 15 years in the future being like, man, I miss Lamar. I wish Lamar would come back. And I want to say, you know what? I appreciated those moments. So it's games like these where, you know, he didn't throw a Jackson 5, although he was close. He didn't throw for 400 passing yards. You know, he had 10 incompletions, which still isn't bad. And still, like, we're saying, oh, Lamar, the standard, man. The standard's like all the way up here. And Lamar didn't necessarily have that standard game, but his standard game is another quarterback's elite game. And that's how good Lamar Jackson actually is. Speaking of a player that impacted the game more beyond what he is used to doing, Derrick Henry found no running room. Again, I mentioned Jerry Jeudy's comments, and Roquan Smith actually had some comments on Jerry Jeudy's comments after the game, because obviously those comments made waves. And so Roquan ended up saying about those comments, which I thought was interesting. He said, that's what he chose to say with his mouth. At the end of the day, it's about what you do on the field. Talking don't win you anything. It's about how you come out and play. Hats off to him for having his opinion. So again, Roquan Smith having something to say there about Jerry Jeudy. But you know what? Grant Delpit also had comments about Derrick Henry not being hard to tackle. And that Browns defense, I will say, backed up those words. They did a good job. 11 carries for 23 yards for Derrick Henry in this game. No touchdowns, as I mentioned earlier in the show. But you know what Derrick Henry did? Derrick Henry pass blocked like a man possessed. He was incredible as a pass blocker. And that's what you do. That's what Lamar does. That's what these great players do. When stuff isn't going your way, when it's not your game, when things are happening that you don't like and sometimes you can't even control it when it happens. Go out there and find another way to impact the game and impact winning. And that's what Derrick Henry, in my opinion, did in this game yesterday. There were multiple plays, even when the Ravens were backed up towards their own end line. Derrick Henry on a play where Lamar was in the end zone trying to give the Ravens some breathing room. He chopped down a free rusher. I guess it wasn't free because he was going up against Derrick Henry, but he chopped down a rusher to give Lamar just enough time to give the Ravens that breathing room. Like Derrick Henry, to me, I was really impressed by him. Not on the ground, obviously. It wasn't good. The Ravens offensive line, the Browns were swarming. It was the difficult day for the run game. The Ravens averaged 2.1 yards per carry. Lamar only had 2 runs on the day. The Browns really tightened that up, but Lamar made an impact. And you see the receivers here. Zay Flowers, 11 targets, 7 receptions, 75 yards. No player on the Ravens has more than 4 targets if your name is not Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is that guy there. But I want to give a shout out to Tez Walker. Talked about DeAndre Hopkins, Tylan Wallace, even. Like, these are the unsung heroes where DeAndre makes his vet plays. Tez Walker, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns. And just a side note, I talked about this on the watch along and on the instant reaction show. You have Torrey Smith is a guy that Eric DeCosta compared Tez Walker to. Tez Walker has 3 NFL catches. All 3 are for touchdowns. You want to know who else did that? Torrey Smith. Torrey Smith's first 3 catches were also for touchdowns. It's funny how life works, funny how sports works. Tylan Wallace, he had the Tylan Wallace drive, right? That fumble that Derrick Henry had, he recovered that, gave the Ravens an opportunity. And then the next play, Tylan Wallace catches a touchdown off of a fake to Derrick Henry because the defense wanted to creep up after that 9-yard run from Derrick Henry. Or I guess it was 8, which actually ended up being his largest run of the day. So it's moments like that where, you just feel really good for players who have really worked hard. Tylan Wallace has worked so hard. He's had great moments. And hopefully for Tez, he can continue to build off of that alongside DeAndre Hopkins as well. Rashad Bateman, 2 for 15. Mark Andrews, 1 for 2. Kind of a slow start for both those guys this season. But, we saw how Mark responded after last season's slow start. Hopefully this is the same thing for him. But Isaiah Likely hopefully will come back soon. So that split will be very, very interesting for me. Some team stats just to talk about here. Well, actually, let's get into the other I talked about Roquan a ton, but other defensively, mentioned Tavius with his strip sack. That was awesome. Keon Martin played a decent amount of snaps after Marlon Humphrey went down with his injury. We saw Teddy Buchanan play a boatload of snaps, had 6 tackles. Looks like he is a new starter next to Roquan Smith. TJ Tampa had a nice play. Mike Green, so close to his first NFL sack on Joe Flacco. Would have been so poetic if that happened. Nnamdi Madubuike had a sack on Joe. So, solid all the way around. Kyle Hamilton was flying around this football field. I mentioned Nate Wiggins. He picks off that Joe Flacco pass and almost takes it back to the house for a pick 6. And, the pass rush too, like I mentioned it off. I want to shout him out again. A lot of disruptive pressure from him on the day. Special teams wise too. I thought Jordan Stout outside of 1 punt had a really good day. I thought that Jay Cummel with that blocked punt changed the landscape of the game here. And you want to look at some of the team stats. I mean, the Browns outgained the Ravens in total yards. They outgained the Ravens through the air, outgained the Ravens on the ground. But you know what? The Ravens won this with teamwork. They won this as a team. And I thought that was really cool here. Time of possession, the Browns won a little bit. And, on 3rd down, the Ravens went 3 of 12. It was not a good 3rd down day for the Ravens. The Browns went 7 of 18, so still under 50%. But the game was sloppy itself. It was a weird game for the offense, but the defense picked up the slack. And again, your team scores 41 points. It's hard to complain about that. And there's still stuff you can work on. The offense did not play nearly their best game, and they still put up 41. That's a heck of a statement there by the Ravens. So Ravens moved to 1-1. Really big win. Detroit coming to town on Monday night. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully, new background's a hit. Continue to add to it again, as I said. And we'll be back here tomorrow talking more Ravens football. So be sure on the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form, follow along in audio form, and I will see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.